Preseason testing is done. The latest updates are on the cars. Who's the fastest? What do we learn? What can we predict going into the 2025 season? All that and more on Formula 454. It's the last year for this generation of Formula 1 car, so it's only natural we're going to see some commonalities between the different cars. Every team has gone with this downwash type design that Red Bull went full tilt with at the beginning of 2022, where you have this high pressure area right here, goes underneath the side pod and back towards the beam wing and the diffuser. Every team has gone with the overbite on the side pods, which Red Bull again started a couple of years ago. But Alpine has gone with the underbite, which Red Bull also started, but they switched it to the overbite because I guess that was more efficient. Every team has gone with these cooling vents on the side of their car, except for Williams, who just seem to be running these channels like that. I really like Aston Martin's design. They have this little block-off plate that covers the amount of slots needed, and they can open that up based on the cooling needs required. And finally, all the teams seem to have gone with this sharper edge of the rear wing's upper element right here. You can see that it kind of has this sharp edge right there, and nothing really attaches to the main plane anymore, whereas it used to kind of roll softly over like this, and it would attach to that lower element like so. So I guess every team has found that is a much more efficient design. So the differences are in the small details and maybe the things that we can't really see on the outside of the car. Things like cooling and the floor and also weight. Ferrari unveiled a properly different car compared to last year. You can really see the size and shape difference in the side pods compared to last year. This year we have that P-shaped radiator inlet versus the big open one last year. And then we have that overbite versus the underbite of last year, which Ferrari did change. And then we have the pull rod suspension versus last year's push rod, which is not as big of a deal as people like to think it is, but there is some pros and cons to each of those. And of course we have that V-shaped lower element of the rear wing. So a lot of changes going on, and you would expect it to be a significant step forward. McLaren looks very similar to last year's car, though they did change the track rod to the front suspension, and it's supposed to divert more air towards the floor, which, as we know, is the most important part of the car aerodynamically. Mercedes also went very aggressive with their side pods. Their inlets are very slim, and it kind of goes out to like that. Much different than before. And check out the undercut. It goes up very sharp and all the way down. Like, that is a deep undercut right there. Like McLaren, they also changed their front suspension to get more airflow to the floor. So that could be significant. The RBs really closed in their bodywork compared to last year. No surprise, there's a lot of similarities to the Red Bull. But that livery, whew, man, best livery of 2025? Maybe. Aston Martin also made some pretty big changes, at least on the real car. The launch car was a fake. But here you can see the real car. The side pods, very slim, very narrow. I'm curious how the cooling is going to be on that car. Of course, it has the side vents right there. We talked about that. And then these torpedoes that go towards the back and exit out around the exhaust right here. They're very similar to what the RB20s, last year's Red Bull, was like that. And on the Red Bull, that ended up being their low drag or low downforce configuration. So I know Aston Martin had a problem with drag last year, so I'm wondering if they found something there. Alpine kind of shrunk down everywhere. They also have that rear torpedo shape like last year's Red Bull. The radiator inlets, much narrower or much slimmer. So I think that'll be good for them. We'll see how they do this year. The new Williams has an awfully big side pod. Like, look how bulky this is. It reminds me of the Ferraris from a couple of years ago, but I have a hard time believing that that is an advantage because all the teams seem to keep evolving their side pods to become more and more compact. Clearly it's more efficient. And yet the Williams, they bring out that. So I don't know about that one. The Sauber, a little bit different everywhere. Their radiator inlets are still rather large. They haven't caught on to that P-shaped inlet that all the top teams are doing like that. But hopefully the car's more competitive than last year. The Haas, a similar story as Sauber, changes everywhere, but still a rather large radiator inlet. But the big story for them is they keep blowing up the bodywork. I assume that they've changed the construction of the carbon fiber to reduce the weight most likely, and it's just not handling the load. So they got some work to do before the first race. Finally, Red Bull released a car that was pretty much identical to last year's RB20, and they ran that for the first 2 days of testing. But then on day 3, they did release an update with the new nose and front wing. What's interesting is Adrian Newey said he always liked a nose that was very narrow. Now that Adrian Newey's gone, they have a nose that's a little bit wider. And then they released their own version of the side ventilation. So nothing major, though Pierre Waget said, the entire cooling system has been modified because it severely limited our aerodynamic development last year. The whole underside has been adjusted to increase the car's operating window. And if you look at this picture, that seems to be the case. That is some pretty significant changes. Now, is it enough? I'm not sure, because during testing, it seems like the Red Bull camp expected more. As for testing, you can never really put too much stock into the fastest times, but there is some information that we can use to learn. Day 1, McLaren, Mercedes, Red Bull, and Ferrari are at the top. Sauber and Haas are at the bottom. Haas looking particularly bad. Day 2, Williams at number 1. That's a surprise. But Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull are up near the top. Sauber and Haas down near the bottom. The Haas looking particularly bad. Day 3, Mercedes, Red Bull, McLaren, and Ferrari up near the top. Sauber and Haas down near the bottom. Now the fastest times of each team across all 3 days, Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull, and McLaren all up near the top. Haas and Sauber down near the bottom and quite a ways off the pace. The outlier is Williams. Are they actually that fast? Are they legit? I'm not so sure. It's not out of the question that they're doing some sponsor hunting. They set a fast time to get their name in the media. Things are looking good to attract potential sponsors, but really they're not quite that fast. We'll see. One thing that stood out for me was on day 2, they did their race simulations. Charles Leclerc and Lando Norris both did theirs at the same time of the day. They both had obviously full tanks of gas for full race simulations, though they did have slightly different tire selections. But the McLaren was significantly faster. We're talking like 5, maybe 8 or 9 tenths faster at times. So quite a difference. Kimi Antonelli and his Mercedes also did a race simulation, and he did his in the morning, so it's not quite the same, but it did seem like his race pace was similar to the Ferraris, give or take. Now, if I'm to make a half-assed prediction going into the 2025 season, as the cars stand right now, I think McLaren's still the best car. I think Mercedes is sitting well at number 2. I think the Red Bulls looked okay. Their pace wasn't too bad, though the team didn't seem terribly impressed with it. But maybe they got the poker faces on. Who knows? Ferrari might be a little bit off at number 4. They do seem fast over a single lap, but I'm not sure about the race pace and the consistency. So yeah, their pace over a long run, maybe not as strong. But maybe the car is a rocket. Who knows? Maybe they just hit it well. I'm thinking Alpine might be the best of the rest. That's a bit of a stretch, but maybe. Aston Martin, RBs, the Williams, take your pick for 6, 7, and 8. Though Williams maybe is a shocker. Maybe they are legit and maybe they're somewhere up in the top 4. Who knows? I can't wait to find that out. So then Sauber and Haas are right at the bottom. But what do you guys think? Who is the fastest? Who's the slowest? Is Williams actually that good? Leave a comment. I want to hear about it. And leave a thumbs up, subscribe, and as always, thanks for watching.